Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky. I'm a Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and apologies for that very brief delay. Had some technical issues on the back end, but I think we are good to go. We are streaming today live on Behance. We're also streaming on Twitter. If you are tuning in on Twitter, hello, but I won't be able to see your chat. If you do want to hang out, ask questions, give some feedback on the work that I'm created, hop over to behance.net/challenge/XD, and a big hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever it is wherever you are in the world. To everyone joining me live, we've got Paco in the house, Anna and Jack and Tim. And if you are tuning in live, let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear that. And hopefully not all of you are caught in the crazy snowstorms going around the country. I know Paul Tranny is flying back into Denver not too long from now, so he's going to be flying into some crazy snow. So we've got Agnes and Richard and Lindsay. Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you, Celine. Welcome everyone. So if you're brand new to these masterclasses, these are fun. We've been running them all day. We had Terry White in the morning with some Lightroom masterclass goodness. Then we had Paul Tranny with Photoshop, Jason Levine with Premiere, and I am here diving into Adobe XD. And these are definitely more on the advanced side. So if you're brand new to XD, you might pick up on some tips and tricks, but we're gonna definitely be going into some advanced designing techniques using the new content-aware layout feature, which is really cool. And we're gonna be looking at some prototyping as well. So Ria is from Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got Jack from Ohio, who does have some snow. Anna says it's snowing 2 days ago in Chicago, but it all melted. Ooh, you are lucky. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm gonna hop over to my screen, and this is, let me actually just move my screen up a little bit, just so I can see a little bit better. I want to make sure that I can see all of your lovely chat messages. There we go. All right, so we are good to go. So here's my Dribbble account. Now, the reason I'm showing this isn't just to get a few extra Dribbble followers, although I would appreciate it. Dribbble.com/Pinsky. But I did upload this. And this is what we're going to be kind of diving into today. We're going to create as much of this as possible. We're going to prototype it. I'm going to show you how to use repeat grids, content-aware layout, a lot of cool different things. And, eventually, hopefully within the next few days, I'm going to be releasing this as a UI kit over on letsxd.com, which you can find right over here, letsxd.com. And there's a freebie section. I have a bunch of UI kits. I also recently released a 5-minute challenge to kind of complement some of the longer challenges that we do on a daily basis here at Adobe Live. So if you just want to dive in very quickly and learn something new and do a 5-minute challenge, it is there. All right. Jack says, I don't think I'm following you on Dribbble. Hold on. I'm going to block you from Behance. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we're going to hop over to Adobe XD. We're just going to dive into this, and we're going to have a lot of fun. If anyone out there does have questions throughout this process, definitely throw them in the Behance chat. Again, if you are watching on Twitter, hop over to behance.net/live/Adobe Live, and I'll do my best to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and create. Let's go for, I think it's a 1600. Let me just double check. I think it's 1600 by 1200. And the reason I'm doing that is because usually I make these things specifically to share on Dribbble, which is a 4:3 aspect ratio. So 1600 by 1200 will give you a nice high resolution image when you are uploading to Dribbble. So I'm going to go ahead and create this lovely custom sized artboard. Of course, if you are designing for web or mobile, there's a lot of different presets you can just dive into right there. All right. Let me make this a little bit bigger, and we've got this lovely artboard right here, and we're just going to start blocking things out. And I typically do this. Sometimes I dive straight into high fidelity because of lack of time, but I really like to, hey, Dominic from Slovakia, welcome. What time is it over in Slovakia? I'm very curious. Let me know. Yeah, I like blocking things out just so I have an idea of where things are going to kind of land on the artboard, and especially when you're talking about user experience, you want to make sure that you know exactly where things are going to be and where your users are going to be clicking on before you start adding some crazy colors. But because of lack of time, sometimes we combine those two things. So now, the background of this artboard, white is probably fine, but I'm going to go dive in to my appearance section over to the right, and I may just want to introduce a little bit of color. Maybe like that's not bad. It's very rare that you just click on a color and you're like, yeah, I'm feeling that one. I can always change this later, but this blue is looking kind of nice. I'm kind of digging it. So I'm gonna go with that color blue. Hopefully it's coming through on your end. So Anna says it's 21:05. What is that? That's 9, 10, I don't know. I'm not very good with military hours, but that's awesome. So we've got this blue background, and we might want an overall container. And oh, Dominic says 20. Oh, so they're in the same place. All right. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. I'm just going to create a container. I'm going to drag one out across this entire artboard and make sure it's centered, just like that. I might want to round out the corners a touch. We've got these lovely handles on the inside, and I'll just pull those inwards a little bit. 34, 32 pixels looks pretty good. Looks nice. I probably don't need a border because the contrast is looking pretty good. The white container against that blue background will probably play really well with accessibility, but I might want to just introduce a little bit of that blue from the background into that container. So I'm going to switch over to, hey, Chris Cannon, welcome. I'm just going to pull in just a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy with it. Maybe I'll just, desaturate it just a touch, just to kind of have it blend, right? Again, nothing too crazy. There's the white and there's the blue. Very subtle, but it'll work. All right, the first thing I want to do is start working on, I'm going to make sure to name this container. I'm going to start working on the navigation bar. Hey, Ryan, welcome. Yeah, your afternoon did just get better. We're going to have a lot of fun during this masterclass. I'm going to make sure to name my artboard. Sweet. All right, so I'm going to start working on that navigation bar over to the right, or to the left, the other right. And if you saw the preview on Twitter or Discord, or did I post it on Dribbble? I don't know if I posted the animated one. It's going to basically expand as well, which is going to be really fun. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, and I'm going to draw one out just like this. We'll start it out in the collapse state. I'm going to round out the corners just a touch, and make sure it's nice and centered in the middle of my document, just like that. I can turn off my border. Now this white just isn't working. We may want to introduce a little bit of color to kind of make it pop out for this dashboard. So I'm going to go and grab the fill. And for this one, we may actually want a gradient. So under solid color in your fill picker, I'm going to choose linear gradient. And for the top color, we're going to go for let's go for a nice pinkish color with a little bit of red. Ooh, that's a nice color. And then we're going to dive into the bottom color, and maybe we'll go over a little bit more purple. Maybe not so purple, and maybe a little bit darker. That's not bad. When you're working with gradients, especially in 2020, 2019, you want to go very subtle, because if you do something like this, then it's just way too, or if you just go like this, that one's not too bad depending on the situation. But in general, you kind of want to go very subtle with your gradients. You don't want to go too crazy. So that looks pretty good. And later on in the masterclass, we're gonna touch on background blurs. So it will affect the gradient a little bit, but we are gonna go with that and see what that looks like. But that looks pretty good. I would argue that maybe this has to be a little bit more purple, possibly, maybe a little bit more subtle. It's very subtle, but that's a good thing, right? All right, so we've got this container going on, and we may want a few elements. Obviously, we want some icons. But at the top, let me go ahead and name this. I'm going to name this navigation. And at the top, we might want an add button. I'm not sure what this add button is going to do. Maybe let me know in the chat what you think it might do. But I'm going to go ahead and draw one out just like this. Make sure it's centered in the middle of my document, just like that. I'm going to turn off the border. I'll keep it at white. It's not too bad. And in the middle, I might want some sort of a plus button. Now, of course, you could grab a text tool, draw out a plus button, or type one out. But I'm going to grab my line tool, just draw one out across here. I might want to increase the size quite a bit. Oops, not 11. That's probably way too thick. I'm going to round out the caps. That looks pretty good right about there. Make sure it's centered. And I'm going to simply just sample. I'm going to sample one of these purple colors, purple pink colors, just like that. I might want to duplicate this, Command and Control D, and then just flip it 90 degrees. Boop. There we go. And now we have a plus button. I'm going to make sure to group all of these elements. I'm going to do my best to organize everything throughout this process. I'm just going to name this plus. Beautiful. Now, going down this navigation bar, we need some icons. And we need an icon for, let's say, a dashboard, maybe analytics, some sort of an inbox, settings, that sort of thing. So, there's plugins you can use. You can create your own icons, but I'm going to hop over to Nucleo, which is a third-party plugin manager. And I have a bunch of icon sets in here. So let's go ahead and type out dashboard. And that's a pretty good one right there. I'm simply going to copy it, paste it directly into Adobe XD, and I've got one icon there. Now it is a border-based icon, right? So if you were to simply just start enlarging it, you're going to notice that it thins out a little bit. So keep that in mind. If you are working with border-based icons and you make them a little bit larger, let's go for 32. And you're also going to notice that, right? Because they're technically all different shapes, when you increase the size of a border-based icon while you're not holding down the shift key, responsive resize is going to start to do its thing. So you want to keep that in mind and maybe turn off responsive resize if you are going to be using this area up here to resize your icons. So that looks pretty good right about there. I'm going to change the border to white. Fancy. We've got about 1.5 pixels. Maybe we'll jump to 2 pixels just to thicken it up just a little bit. And thank you, Tim, for posting that link. So we've got our border or dashboard icon. We might want some sort of a chart. And this one over here looks pretty good. I'm going to copy that, paste that into, where did I paste it? Paste it into here. Here we go. Now this is a fill-based icon, so this is not a border-based icon. So we're not going to run into too many problems with responsive resize in this case. But I'm going to set the width to about 32, just to match that dashboard at the top, right? And I'll set the fill to white. And hey, Ricardo, welcome. And I might want some sort of like an envelope. I can't spell. Envelope. There we go. And I did have, where did that one go that I really liked? It was like a flying paper airplane. Ooh, here's one. That looks pretty good. I'm going to copy this one, pop it into XD one more time. This one is a border-based icon, so I want to make sure to turn off responsive resize before I do any resizing. 32. Bump this up to about 2 to match all the others. That looks pretty good. And we might want, let's say, a bell icon. Hey, Kate, welcome. And welcome anyone else who might be joining. Again, if you do have questions, throw them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to try to whip through this navigation bar, or at least the icon part of it, as fast as possible, because this is kind of boring, right? There we go, we've got that, and we might want, let's say, a settings icon. Settings, and that one looks fantastic. Beautiful, all right. Turn off responsive resize, and 32. Fancy. All right, so we've got our icons looking pretty good. Now we might want to make sure that they're all evenly spaced, right? Maybe I'll want this one about here and maybe this one, somewhere about here, right? And I want all the other icons evenly spaced. Now I'm noticing that this one here looks a little bit thicker. So maybe, I think there was another one. This one, is this a border-based icon? It's not. Well, you know what? We're gonna run with it. And I can always change that icon later. But we might want to make sure that they're all evenly spaced, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the icons inside of the layers panel. And over here to the right, at the top right, we have our distribution options. And I will just want to make sure that they are all evenly distributed vertically. And it's going to magically do its thing. So now they're all evenly spaced from each other. Things are looking really nice. Now maybe at the bottom, I might want a little bit of a profile picture. Don't know why, but you know what? I'm going to run with it. So I've got a little profile picture down here at the bottom, and I'm going to take a look. This plus button is about 40 pixels from the top. I want to make sure that this one is also 40 pixels from the top. Very good. Now I might want to just bring this in a little bit, and one more time, I'm just going to make sure that they're all evenly distributed. Beautiful. I'm going to hop over to Finder. We do have some lovely images here, and maybe, this guy with the beard. I've used this guy before. I'm going to drop him in here, and now he is the profile of this lovely navigation bar. All right. So things are looking pretty good. I do want to make sure to group all these elements, and I'm going to name this navigation bar, or just whatever, navigation bar, navigation, who knows. So I might want to actually just dive in here, grab these icons, just move them up a little bit, just so they're kind of centered in the middle of this document. All right, so we've got this thing looking pretty good. The zoom on my trackpad isn't cooperating. There we go, okay. So now we might want to also highlight the fact that one of these sections is the active section. Maybe we are on the dashboard at the moment. So we might want to create some sort of indication that that's the case, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into this navigation bar. I'm going to select the ellipse tool, draw one out, just like this. Pop this over here, make sure it lines up with that dashboard icon. We're gonna get back to this in a second, but I'm also gonna grab my rectangle tool and draw one out over top of this. Let me actually hide the ellipse. I probably should have done that 1 second, but I'm gonna draw over there, make this nice and rounded, just like that. That looks pretty good. Actually, you know what? We don't need the ellipse. I'm gonna delete the ellipse. Who needs the ellipse, right? Turn off the border, and I'm going to double click on this rectangle now that I have it created. Double click, and that will give me access to our path. And now what I can do is if I just grab this and move this up, that's gonna look kind of weird, right? So what I wanna do is actually create additional points. So I'm simply going to click right there and click somewhere right about there. Of course, I could draw out some guides to make sure that it's exactly where I need it, but visually it looks pretty good. And now if I drag this up, it looks a little bit sharp. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna simply double click on this newly created point and double click on this point as well. And now when I drag this up, we have this lovely curve, right? So maybe I'll just 1, 2, 3, possibly. I'm holding down my shift key to go in increments of 10 pixels. 1, 2, 3. That looks pretty good. And I'll just move this in a little bit. I can do that, or I can also double click and just move this in a little bit, right? Now, I'm obviously not seeing that dashboard icon because, you know, one, this path is over top of the dashboard icon, but even if I move it down here, you still can't see it because it's white. So I'm simply going to select it and I'm going to change the border to one of these purples, pinks, whatever you want to call it. And that is starting to look pretty good right about there. Now, what I do want to do, let me make this a little bit larger. What I do want to do is make sure that this color is the same color as the background so it blends in really nicely. So I'm going to set my fill, shortcut key I, and then boop, there we go. And now it blends in really nicely. And what I can do is I can double click and just move this inwards. So we have this lovely little curve just like that. And now we have this cool indicator that this is the active icon or section or whatever you want to call it. So things are looking pretty good. Now, before I move on to all the other sections, I do want to show you how to animate this navigation bar. So what I might want to do is when hover takes place, for example, we might want some text layers to kind of come in from the side and kind of give more detail and more context of what this navigation bar exactly is. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead inside of the navigation bar group. I'm going to type out the word, let's say dashboard. And I'm going to go with the font Pop. Do I go with Poppins? Do I? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do Sophia Pro today. Sophia Pro is pretty good. Now this one, I'm going to choose this purple color. That looks pretty fancy. Maybe I'll just pump this up just a little bit to about 22. That looks good right there. Now down here, we might want, this might be analytics. I can't spell, analytics. And this one's going to be white. Right? Whoops, I missed it. There we go. Make sure to capitalize that A. Richard's asking, is this dashboard for desktop or tablet? This one's probably going to be for desktop, considering it will have some hover effects, but of course you could modify this very easily for tablet. This might be inbox. This one might be notifications. And we might want settings down here. Beautiful. Now, of course, we don't want all of these to be displayed immediately in the collapsed state. We want them only to be displayed when this navigation bar expands on hover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first move these kind of outside the bounds of this navigation bar. And I'm spacing them out like I am doing so that when the animation takes place using Auto Animate, it's going to allow these to kind of come in staggered, right? Kristen saying, geeking out so hard over this simple edit. Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that. So we've got these navigation. Maybe the dashboard one might be semi-bold to, again, give you some context that you are on the dashboard. Now, if I click out of it, you're noticing you can see all these text layers. And obviously, we don't want that, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to create a mask so that only the collapsed state and no text layers are shown by default. So I'm going to grab my navigation bar, at least the shape layer in the back. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it right at the top. And what this will allow me to do is allow me to select all these layers underneath the navigation bar. And under the object menu, I can go to mask with shape. And if you're on Windows, you would right click on any of the elements on your canvas, and I believe there's an object submenu, and then you would mask with shape as well. So that will basically take everything and put it inside of that shape that we just created, or at least duplicated. I'm going to name this navbar. So now you can notice we don't see those text layers, which is exactly what we want. Now, how do we create the second state to create a hover effect? Well, first you need to create a component. Now I already have everything in a group. You don't need it in a group. You just have to select all the elements, but I'm going to right click and then make component. You can also go over here to the side and press the plus button beside component to create a component. Component, right? Boop, there we go. So now we have a component with a default state. We also need to create our hover state. So I'm going to press that plus button one more time, and we've got our hover state option right here, and you're going to notice to the right there is a lightning icon that indicates that it'll be automatically wired up when we do select this. So we've got our hover state created and selected. Very important you have that new state selected. Now whatever changes we make will apply specifically to the hover effect. So I'm going to dive in here. I'm going to grab the navigation bar mask and also the navigation bar shape and simply pull this out a little bit, just like this for the expanded state. And now I can start making changes. I'm going to dive in here, grab this guy, just move it out a little bit like that. And now I'm going to grab this, move this over. This is about 19. Let's go for 24 pixels from the right side of that icon. I want to make sure that all the other text layers line up nicely. So what I'm going to do is in my layers panel, I'm going to select all of the text layers just like that. And then back to my distribution options, I want to make sure to align them to the left. And it'll just do it for me, which is really fancy. All right, so now that's it, right? We've got our hover state set up. We've got our collapse state set up, and you can toggle back and forth. We've got our default state. We've got our hover state with all the changes. And all you have to do is press the play button at the top, and woo, and that's it. You've got your magical navigation bar that just does its thing. It expands as you hover. Of course, you can change that hover to a tap trigger if you don't want hover to take place. But you know what? I think that's looking pretty fancy and really smooth, if I do say so myself. All right, so we've got our navigation bar pretty much set up, and now we might want to start adding some elements on the right side of the dashboard. And let me know in the chat how things are looking for you. So I'm going to start with just a title. I'm going to just type out dashboard, just like that. I can make it larger with the lovely handle right below it. Now I may want to do a few things. I may want all caps, right, for this. I could go ahead and press the all caps button, just like that, but I might want to switch up the font. And I've been using the Rift Soft font. Maybe not Rift Soft, maybe just Rift. Just like that, and that's a pretty good font, and it pairs really well with Sophia as well. Now it is an all caps font, so you can't, even if you unpress the uppercase button or press the lowercase button, nothing's really going to happen because this font is just uppercase letters. So keep that in mind. And I might want to change this to a darker color and maybe just go for, let's say, medium possibly, or maybe demi. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna line it up just like this. I can draw out some guides to make sure everything lines up really nicely. That's looking pretty good. Beautiful. All right, so we've got a title now for our dashboard, and we might want some content underneath. Maybe in this case, our top posts of the week. And you know, assuming this is some sort of like an influencer style dashboard or social media, I don't know what it might be. We can come up with some ideas and names and that sort of thing. But I'm gonna grab my rectangle, and I'm going to simply draw out a rectangle just like this, right? And just because, you know, our navigation bar is nice and rounded, we're going to round out the corners as well. We probably don't want to go for the same 32 pixels as we did for the navigation bar, because these specific elements are a little bit smaller. You kind of want to do everything, you know, just pull it back just a touch. Maybe 18 pixels looks pretty good, something right around there. That looks pretty fancy. And now for the inside, we're going to turn off the border. The inside, we're going to have a few things. We're going to have an image, and we're also going to have some text and maybe some, you know, social media elements, maybe, you know, profile pictures or how many messages or how many, you know, whatever it might be. You can, likes, I don't know, you can go crazy with it, right? So we've got this image here. We might want to duplicate it very quickly just so we can have room for the image, right? So I'm going to Command and Control D. Boop, there we go. And I'm going to just pull this up. Now you really can't see what's going on. So let me just change the color just so we can see what's happening. And I might want to, the rounded corners are not too bad, but what you can do if you wanted to is you can just hold down the shift key and just pull these corners back in. And let me know in the chat what you think. Do you think the rounded corner, you know what? I don't know. Rounded corners, sharp corners, I don't know. I kind of like the rounded corners. We're gonna do it. Now I'm not too worried about the color right now because we're gonna pop some images in there at some point. But I'm gonna keep the corners rounded just because. And maybe right below we might want some text. So in this case, this will be top secret. That's way too big. So I'm gonna drop that down a touch, move this right about here. That looks pretty good. We've got about 17. Let's go for 18 pixels from the left. And now maybe below we might want some social media profile pictures. Maybe these are the people who have viewed or liked. Richard says sharp corners. Anna says rounded corners. I don't know. So I'm gonna draw out an ellipse using my ellipse tool. And we've got one looking pretty good right about there. And I might want some more. So I'm gonna hit the command, or I could do Command or Control R, but I can also hit the repeat grid button right at the top. Boop, there we go. We now have a repeat grid. I can just drag out a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 maybe? 5? I don't know, 5. We'll do 5. And I might want to actually just bring these back a little bit. So they're kind of overlapping on each other, right? And I'm gonna make sure this will be profile photos. Make sure to keep everything nicely organized. And I need some photos, obviously. Joe says, just do you, Howard. I agree. I'm gonna run with it. So we've got some profile photos. I'm gonna grab this one. I'm gonna grab this one, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm simply gonna drop them directly onto this repeat grid, just like that. And if I need to, I can always double click and adjust the cropping, adjust the positioning. Everything's looking pretty fancy. We've got some profile photos. You know what? I might want to get a little bit fancy with this. Just add a little bit of separation between each photo. So I'm gonna add a border and a white border. So it kind of blends in with the background. Maybe I'll just increase the size just a little bit. Ooh, that's looking pretty good. That's looking fancy. All right. So we've also got this image at the top. I do need some images, but we are gonna be putting this inside of a larger repeat grid. So I'll do that in just a second. What I wanna do is maybe over to the right, we might want an indicator of how many chat messages this specific post has received. So I'm gonna go up to Nucleo one more time, and let's type out chat maybe. And let's see what we've got. This one looks pretty good. I'm gonna go for this one. I'm gonna copy this, pop it into Adobe XD. The size looking pretty good, not too bad. Make sure it's nicely spaced. We've got about 18 pixels on that side, 18. So I'll just, I'll make sure that everything's nicely spaced just like that. And in a moment or two, we're gonna start using content-aware layout to really get fancy. So we've got these chat bubbles. Maybe I'll just drop the weight just a little bit. And we might want some sort of a number, right? So I'm gonna grab my text tool and maybe let's say 29. Maybe this specific post has received 29 chat messages. One of my lights just went out. That was weird. Now I'm noticing, it kind of clashes a little bit. I might want to add a little bit of a notch at the top of this chat bubble. And we could go crazy. My Zoom, everything's breaking today. We could go ahead and start working and tweaking the actual border of this chat bubble. But you know what? I'm just gonna grab an ellipse tool, draw out an ellipse, and just move it back there, right? You don't have to get fancy. You don't have to go too crazy. You just got something like this, and now we have the amount of chat messages. Just an ellipse, just to hide part of that chat bubble. And I'm gonna make sure to group everything really nicely. This will be chat messages. And there we go. Things are looking pretty good. I may want to just grab actually all of this stuff. Top secret and this. And just make this a little bit larger, because it's looking a little bit too small. There we go. And maybe just increase the size of these rounded corners a little bit. Of course, because I expanded that, my repeat grid also expanded, which I don't want. So what I'm gonna do is I'm simply going to fix it. There we go. That's all. Beautiful. All right. Any questions? Richard says, border on the thick icon. Looks like it needs to be the same thickness as the font. Yeah, you're probably right. I probably should, especially now that I've enlarged it. Just increase it a little bit. There we go. And of course, I can always go back, because this will be in a repeat grid, I can always go back and make changes later on. Now, one thing I might also want to do is add a little bit of a shadow underneath this shape in the background. I'm gonna make sure to group all these, and this will be, I'll just say photo. I might want to add a little bit of a shadow, but not a typical shadow. I don't want to add just a shadow like this, because that's boring. It's not, it's fine, but it's, What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate this shape, Command and Control D. I'll just grab the one in the background, just name this shadow. Maybe I'll just name this one container, and this will be photo, just to make sure I keep everything nicely organized again. I'm gonna move it down just a little bit. I'm going to sample the background color, this one here, and just bring it back a little bit, just so darken it just a touch, just like that. And I might want to now turn on object blur over here to the right within the properties inspector. That will basically blur this object and give us a shadow we can really start to control. I might want to pull the corners in a touch. Ooh, it's looking not bad, but maybe I need to drop the color a little bit, darken it just a touch. There we go. So now we have a nice rounded corner, rounded shadow. It's looking all right. I'm gonna make some tweaks to all this stuff. Pull this in a touch, just a little bit. I broke my repeat grid again. And my zoom, what is going on with my zoom on my trackpad? All right. Fix my repeat grid, there we go. All right, we've got a little bit of a shadow, and we may eventually use just use the shadow for an, a hover effect, but for now we'll just leave it as is, looking pretty good. We can always make changes later on. So we've got our first photo card set up, and now we want a few more. We might want 3 going across this dashboard. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press my lovely repeat grid button one more time, boop, and draw out or drag out 3 additional cards, or 2 additional cards, just like that. I'll space them out evenly, just like that, and that is looking pretty good. I'm kind of liking that. So now that I've got these 3 cards going across my artboard, I'm gonna hop over to Finder and grab a few images. I may want to grab, this image here and drag this in. Of course, you can drag all 3 images in at once, but you know what? Sometimes you just want a frog in that location, and her in that location, and I should probably do this in order, right? Drag this one in this one, and the frog in that one. Beautiful. Looking fancy. Now I can just dive in here. Let's say how sweet it is. And text layers within repeat grids can be overridden really nicely. This will be, 36 comments. And this, I'm just gonna write ribbit. And maybe this one only has, let's say, 12 comments. Maybe 20. I don't know. We'll run with it. There we go. So now we've got our lovely repeat grid set up. Things are looking pretty good on that one. So everything's looking pretty good. Just name this photos. How are things looking, everyone? You liking this? Liking the color that we're kind of introducing into this dashboard? I'm liking it. I think it looks pretty good. All right. Yeah, Kate, Adobe Stock does have the coolest photos. I'm just on Stock all day, just downloading really colorful. If you take a look, just like it's all colorful stuff. I love it. It just pops things out. All right, so now maybe down below here, we might want to start creating some charts. And for this first one, I'm gonna grab my rectangle, make sure everything lines up really nicely. This might be possibly, how many likes you get on a daily basis. So I'm gonna round out the corners again, just kind of matching everything else. It'll be 24 pixels. And for this specific section, since it will be a focus of this dashboard, I might want to really, pop out the color. So I'm going to change the color from solid to linear gradient. And you know what? I could also, I'm going to do this. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to hop into my navigation bar. I'm going to grab that layer at the background, and I'm simply going to copy. I can also go over to my assets panel and add that color directly over there. But you know what? I can just copy that, go over to this shape, and then right click and paste appearance. It'll basically take that color, that lovely pink that we've been working with, and pop it directly onto that shape as well. Of course, you could also use your assets and just click on that and it'll apply it really nicely. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it in XD. So we've got this looking pretty good. I'm gonna extend this down just a little bit. And now we might want some information. We might want a chart, we might want a headline, we might possibly want an icon, a lot of different things we can put in this. So I'm gonna start with number of likes. I'm gonna keep going with that Rift font. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna change this to white. Make sure this is nice, 24, I'll go for 32 pixels from the side. That looks pretty good, right about there. And now in the center, we might want, our chart to show on a daily basis how many likes your photos get. So I'm gonna grab my line tool, and I'm simply going to draw out a massive line right across this shape, just like that. I'm gonna change the color to white to match the rest of the design. I'm gonna round out the caps, which is this little guy right here. Make this nice and thick. Beautiful. And now, of course, we need some points. We need to be able to drag out some nice curvy lines to make this line chart. So what we're gonna do is we're going to double click on this line. So just double click like that. That'll give you access to the path, very similar to how we did it before. And now I can go through and just add, let's say we want 7 days. So we're gonna have to add an additional 5 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That doesn't line up, does it? Let me move these back. And if I was doing this properly, I would probably use grids or guides or a lot of different things, but you know what? I am just going to eye it because that is what I do. Pull these back a little bit. You know what? We're gonna run with it. We are gonna run with it. Chris says, show us the padding feature. Oh, I will, Chris. I will show you the padding feature shortly. So we've got these lines. Of course, I can pull them up or down, and I could make very sharp line charts. It's not very fun. So I'm gonna double click on each of these points, and it's going to convert them into curves, just like that. And now what I can do is I can move them up and down, and we've got this lovely curved chart going on, which shows us how many likes we get on a daily basis. There we go. Maybe I can pull these outwards a little bit to kind of break from our padding. And there we go. So we've got this lovely line chart looking pretty fancy, right? Now, of course, on a line chart like this, I'm just gonna type out line. We need some sort of indicator on where each point is. So there's two things we can do. We can, one, create a bunch of lines going across. And to do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm going to just draw one out just like this. You know what? I'm not gonna grab my line tool. I'm not gonna do that because at the moment, you cannot put gradients on lines. Maybe in the future, but at the moment, you cannot. So I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool, draw one out like this, right? I'm gonna round out the corners completely, turn off the border, and set a fill. Let's go for linear gradient. The top color will be basically that color there, and the bottom color, actually, you know what? The bottom color is gonna be white, and we're just gonna set the blend mode to, let's say, overlay or soft light. That looks pretty good, just so it blends in just a little bit. We don't want these lines to be too in our face. So we've got that going on, and we can turn this into a repeat grid, Command and Control R, and drag out, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just do that. Look at that. Beautiful. That looks pretty good. Looking pretty fancy. We've got these lines going across our chart now to kind of let us know where the points are going to be. I can just name this lines. I don't know. Everything's named lines apparently. And then over top, we might want, a little dot, because some line charts have dots to let you know. And this will kind of also let users know that they can hover over these certain areas. So zooming in here, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, draw out a dot just like this. I'm gonna make it small, but when hover takes place, it's gonna get a little bit larger. So this one is gonna be, I'm gonna fill it in with sort of this pink color, and on the outside, there's gonna be a nice border, just like that. We've got a lovely dot, just beautiful. And I might wanna add a little bit of a shadow just so it separates it from the line a little bit. I'm gonna sample this purple color and just bring it back a touch. And then drop the opacity, just so it's a very subtle shadow with a little bit of purple and pink in it, and that looks pretty good. I'm gonna bring it back just a little bit more. There we go, just so it's nice and subtle. That looks pretty good. Maybe I'll just drop the size just a touch more, because again, we want it to start a little bit small, but when hover takes place, it grows a little bit larger. Now, over top of it, we might also, see you later, Kate, thanks for joining. We might also want like a tag that shows how many likes when someone hovers over that particular day. So I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool, draw one out, and for Chris, I am gonna be using content-aware layout for this. I'm gonna, make sure to round out the corners just a touch, not a lot, but just a little bit. And maybe I'm gonna have, probably don't need a border. And we might want some sort of an arrow pointing downward. So I'm gonna grab my polygon tool, draw one out. I might wanna flip it, boop. Turn off the border and round out the corners just a touch. You don't wanna go too crazy with these. Just like that, and I'm going to turn this into a Boolean object. So I'm gonna combine these two shapes with the add option at the top. And what's nice is content-aware layout works beautifully with Boolean objects. So I'm gonna do that, and in the center, I'm gonna just do, let's say, 65 likes. I'm gonna sample one of the lovely purples. And of course, I can use my assets panel if I wanted to, but we're gonna run with this. All right, so that looks pretty good. It's a little large. I can make it a little bit smaller. Responsive resize does its thing. Make this a little bit smaller as well. And there we go. Perfect. All right, so we've got this looking pretty, it's looking fine. It's not looking great, but you know what? It'll do for now, I think. We can always make changes later. But what I want to do now is actually set up the hover for this lovely interaction, right? Looking pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna grab all these elements here. So the likes, the polygon in the background, which I might want to actually combine and put it into a group just like that. And this will just be likes. And now what I can do, just for Chris Cannon, I can turn on the new padding feature over to the right. I'm gonna turn that on, and it's essentially going to look at the relationship between that text layer and the layer in the background, which in this case is a Boolean object, and create padding. So now what I can do is if I just jump in here and change, let's say to 1000, so I can just start typing different numbers and that box will automatically resize. Now you might be noticing something. As I did that, the rectangle, the little polygon, also got a bit larger. We may not want that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hop in here, grab the polygon, and under responsive resize, I'm gonna turn on manual and make sure fixed width and fixed height is turned on and that it's snapped over to the left. And now when I do this, I can just do, you're noticing things for the most part are looking pretty good. Of course, what I can do is I can also grab this completely and make sure that fixed height is turned on. And now, let's say 300 and, almost got it. Grab this shape here, fixed height, snap it over to the left. Sometimes you gotta, finagle with responsive resize, but there we go, 450,000 likes, and everything moves as it should. Content-aware layout does its thing. Of course, that's a lot of likes. I wish I got that many likes in a single day, but I'll leave it at 65. So we've got that going on. We're gonna grab the ellipse, and we are going to turn this all into a component. So I'm gonna press the component button over to the right to turn it into a component, and now I can go ahead and create my hover state. Now in this case, this is what I want the hover state to look like for the most part. I will enlarge this just a little bit, but I don't want this to be shown during the non-hover state. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the default state and simply dive into this component, which I should probably name, but I'm running out of time, and I'm simply going to hide the likes tag. So we've got our default state, we've got our hover state, and I'm gonna jump in here and reveal the likes tag, and now we've got our two different states. So if I press play, we've got our lovely navigation bar over to the right, which I should probably, before I do that, I should probably keep on the top of my layer stack. So we've got our lovely navigation bar, right? And we also have our hover effect. It's a little bit small. I would probably increase that a little bit, but it's there, right? Now what's cool is because we now have a single component created with the hover effect, I can just duplicate this over here. I can duplicate it over here, duplicate it here, and duplicate it over here, right? So now we have a few of them. I can dive into each hover state, and let's say this will be, it's probably less likes, so this will be, I don't know, 52, right? And then this one over here, this one might be, this is probably a little bit more, so 68. And this one over here, this is, you know what, looks like it might be 65 as well. And this one over here is probably somewhere in the 70s. So I'm just gonna go for, let's say, 72. There we go. And now I can just hover over any of them. There's 68. I think I broke something on that one. I broke something on some of them. I'm not sure what I did, but I broke something on one of them. I'll have to look into that. But it worked before, I promise. Let me see. Default state, hover state. Yeah, I don't know what I did. I broke something. Interesting. Very interesting. Huh. Another thing you can do, just if you do run into something like this, you can grab the master component and just turn off auto animate. If you don't really need things animating, right? I'm gonna turn off the animation. That way, you've got, there we go, look at that. Fancy, I fixed it. All right, so that's looking pretty good. We've got our navigation bar over to the left. We've got our lovely likes over here in the chart. And maybe, down below, we might want a few additional things, right? We have about, 10 minutes left. Let's go ahead and create 2 additional boxes. I want to show you an interesting trick. And this is kind of a workaround at the moment, but I'm going to create one box here. Maybe I'll line it up with the center of this and just pull it back just a touch. Like that. We'll round out the corners one more time, 24 pixels. I'm not going to be too worried about what I'm putting inside of these boxes at the moment, but I'm going to have 2 boxes, one right there and one right there. Maybe I'll just give some, this will be, whoops, where did it go? Where did it go? Copy and paste. There we go. I'm going to change the color to darker. Maybe this one will be followers by day. And this one over here will be top followers. Now, we're going to get into, in a moment, what we're actually going to put inside of these particular boxes, but I want to show you a little bit of a trick, right? So let me go ahead and select the elements of this chart that we just created, right? And do that. Got all these elements selected. I'm going to make sure to group all these. And we've got here, this is number of likes. And of course, I could go ahead and turn on the padding feature to make sure that everything is nicely snapped. That way, if I do decide to increase the size of this chart, the container in the background comes along with it. And I could make sure to group all of these lovely components as well. So I'm going to group these line chart. And look at that. The container just kind of moves along with it. And of course you can, do the same thing for the lovely little lines in the background. But here's what I want to show you. I want to get a little bit creative with this. So let me make sure to select all of these layers that I just created. I'm going to group these. Bottom boxes. Now, let me set some context, right? So the content-aware layout feature is great. I love it. It saves a ton of time, especially when working with things like buttons and elements like this. But, a lot of designers are asking for more. We always ask for more, right? In specific, they ask for something called stacks. And that would be the ability to have, multiple objects within a padded group so that when you move and adjust one, like let's say this, if I make this a little bit larger, the ones below it also kind of move with it. Now at the moment, that's the keyword, at the moment, that does not exist in Adobe XD. However, there are some workarounds, and I want to kind of show you a clever way to do it, again, at the moment, right? So what I'm going to do is I've got this selected. I have this. So I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to group them. So now that I have a single group, I'm just going to name this boxes. I have a single group with all of these elements. Now, if I just jump in here and do this, nothing's really going to happen. What I want to make sure to do is create a background layer that contains these boxes and also the overall shape of this section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to draw out a section just like this. I'm going to round out the corners. It's probably not necessary to do this, but I'm going to round out those corners and move it to the back of this layer stack. Just like this. And this I'm going to name container. So we've got that done. I'm going to turn the opacity of that container shape down to 0. Now what I want to do is make sure this is inside of this group. I want to grab this section down here, right? The bottom boxes, and also the background layer, and turn that into a group. And this will essentially be the background that Adobe XD uses for content-aware layout. So I'm going to name this background. Again, this is a workaround for now, but if you need some sort of stacking ability, you can kind of do it. So now that we have a group and a group and a group, a lot of groups, and Eric says it's a group and a bigger group and more groups, yeah, basically, but that will improve. So we've got our boxes, the top layer selected. I'm going to turn on padding, which will look at the relationship between this and the background layer. And now, look at that. It's sort of moving. It's not perfect just yet. So what I have to do is I have to go into the background layer, boxes, and I'm going to make sure to turn, got that set. Again, you got to kind of finagle with things, but look at that. So now you basically have that functionality, and you can kind of get really deep with this. But now as I increase the size of this chart at the top, you know, that one at the bottom moves down really nicely. So, you know, there are workarounds, but again, the team is very aware that stacking and that sort of ability is something that people want, and Ria's saying group inception indeed. So we've got that going on, and things looking a little bit better, right? Might want to just increase this size a little bit, just like that. Maybe also the container as well. So there we go. All right. So we might want to add some additional information in here. And I want to show you, before we wrap things up, one of my favorite plugins. We didn't get to everything today, but one of my favorite plugins in Adobe XD. I'm going to hop into this section here, and I'm going to, in the group, I'm going to create an ellipse just like this, and maybe we want a bunch of happy faces in this section, right? So to do that, of course, we could create a repeat grid like we did before and drag out a bunch of happy little faces this way and that way. And we could hop into Finder, grab a bunch of images that we grabbed from Adobe Stock and pop them directly into here. But there's another way to do it. I'm going to hop into my plugins panel, which is right down here at the bottom. And I'm going to find the plugin called UI Faces. If you have not installed UI Faces yet, hop into the plugins manager, find UI Faces. It's actually the #1 most essential plugin right now, and install it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into this repeat grid, select any one of the circles. I'm going to go into the UI Faces plugin, and I want to choose, well, I can choose many of these, right? Unsplash is a good one for Creative Commons images, but I'm going to choose This Person Does Not Exist. And this is one of my favorite things. I don't even know what to call it. It's my favorite things ever, because essentially I believe it's an algorithm developed by NVIDIA, and it creates people that don't exist, as the name implies. It's very creepy. But I'm going to go ahead and choose that and simply press apply. And what's doing now is basically grabbing a bunch of images, completely computer generated images from this service, and it's going to pop them into our repeat grid. And there they go. Look at all these fancy happy people. And again, these people don't exist. These are all completely computer generated images by some crazy algorithm created by NVIDIA. And there they are. It's kind of cool. It's also kind of creepy. So we have our top followers there, and maybe over to the left over here, just to kind of fill this out, we may want an additional chart. So maybe this will be followers by day. So we might want, let's say, another line, right? Drag this up, make this really thick, round out the caps, just like that. Now, I do want to show you one thing, right? Let me make this, it looks pretty good. I do want to show you one more thing, one more pro tip. If I were to grab this, right, turn this into a repeat grid, you might be thinking, oh, you can just turn it into a repeat grid, drag out a few more, space them out, and then dive into this repeat grid, and no, it doesn't work that way. Maybe one day it might. But what you want to do is, let me make this a little bit larger. For something like this, you want to first convert it into a component. So I'm going to make this a component, right? I should do a better job at naming my components, but whatever. I'm going to turn it into a repeat grid now. And now I'm going to drag out a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. There we go. And then space these out really nicely, just like that. And now that we have components inside of a repeat grid, and because components can be overridden, now I can jump in here and make changes as I need to, right? So I can dive in here, make changes as I need to, and everything looks quite fancy. There we go. All right. So Whew, that's a lot. Let's see how things are looking. We've got our, let me move the navigation bar back up. Boop. All right, so we've got our navigation bar that we designed with a hover state. We've got these moving elements that kind of come in. I'm starting to lose my voice. From the right, we've got our photos at the top. We've got our number of likes with also some hover states. And we also started to explore how to kind of game content-aware layout so that, you know, you kind of have a stacking ability. Again, for now, things may change in the future, but we've kind of had some fun today. So I will be releasing this dashboard, at least the completed version of it, on letsxd.com/freebies at some point. I'll also tweet about it and all that fun stuff. But that is going to wrap it up for me for today. Thank you everyone for joining me on this lovely Friday afternoon or evening, or possibly Saturday morning for some of you. I will not be back next week, because next Saturday is my birthday. I'm going out of town on Friday, so I will not be back. The XD team, I believe Sam Anderson will be filling in for me. He'll be doing some really cool stuff in Adobe XD. I'll be back the week after for another masterclass, but definitely stick around. A lot of cool stuff coming up next week, more Adobe live streams. Follow me on all the places. Let's see if my title card works again. There we go. Follow me there. Dribble, Twitter, all that fun stuff. Thank you, Joe and Ariana. You missed it the whole stream. You can definitely go back and watch this on Behance. And I'm probably going to create a series of videos covering a lot of these elements as well at some point. But Anna and Jack and Joe and Ria and Eric and Richard, and if people are still watching over on the Twitter sphere, thank you so much for tuning in as well. Oops. Yeah, well, there you go.